Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dasha, and I'm going to present you our proposal for Forum 2000 together with Tom and Yulia. We all know that there is a huge gap between different generations across the globe these days, especially between the Generation X and Generation Y and millennials. So there is no surprise, actually, that some generations are still a bit of mystery for us, and some of their motivations are still quite surprising. So for this, we decided to create our main goal and to dedicate this project to actually understand the younger people, so the millennials, and to understand how we can strengthen their involvement in public life. And for this, we are taking the holistic approach by combining different research methods. And of course, we understand that these days it's extremely important to keep the cost as low as possible. Therefore, one of the main goals for us is also to keep the research-related costs at the bare minimum. Before we jump into a specific part of research that we did or we suggest doing, I would like us to think about the target group that we are talking about. Because if you think about it, we are actually talking about more than 2 million of younger people only in Czech Republic. So if we are covering the whole Central Europe, the number will be even bigger. So I think it's impossible to imagine that we can only come up with just one study which will suit all of these people, because they all have quite different motivations and they all have quite different relation to how exactly they work with and how publicly open to speaking they are. So for this, we decided to use the See, Think, Do and Care framework. And we decided to segment our groups into 4 different categories to be able to target our survey based on those people. So in C group, this is basically our biggest target group, which is younger people studying at the schools or universities and younger professionals. But in general, they don't yet have any desire or involvement into public affairs life. Then if you think about the Think group, those are the young people who follow the news about public affairs, but they don't yet participate in the offline meetings. Do people, on the opposite, they're actually already politically active, and they actively participate in political public events, both offline and online, and they're not scared of sharing their opinion. And Care group is our most loyal group of people. Those are already our active supporters of NGOs. They're already our volunteers, or they attend all of our activities that NGOs are coming up with. So those are already our loyal members. So we'll be focusing on those groups throughout our research. Our research will be divided into 2 different phases, and Tom will now introduce the phase 1.
So, hello. I will be briefly talking about how are we actually going to get the data and which type of data we will be collecting. In the first phase, we will start with quantitative research by sending out questionnaire. Of course, online questionnaire because of next to nothing costs. The distribution, though, to keep it as low cost as possible, would be to use partnership with schools, universities, friendly activists, members, or people anyhow connected with Forum 2000. Use as much potential as we can from the social media by resharing the invitations. And we also thought about approaching some influencers, because this type of people likes to be seen and tends also to use, greater good to their self-promotion. So they might actually give our research some promotion as well. Regarding the audience, it is kind of self-explanatory, since we have to focus on younger people. So it will be mainly high school students, university students, and young professionals. And of course, with keeping the proportion of the general public or general society in general, by having quotas on age, gender, region, education, and so on. What slightly unusual approach we tried to make was to actually update or accustom the survey flow and wording towards the groups. Dashka was mentioning on the previous slide that when we divide the people into less active and more active halves or parts, we will be able to interrogate them for much or more accurate types of information. And actually to the information themselves, what will be the intention of the quantitative research or the data which we'll be collecting. Of course, there's the necessary demography, but other than that, to uncover the affinity towards public affairs, civic society, or democracy itself, we need to somehow have their opinions on personal values by probably showing them a battery of statements concerning things like freedom of speech, attitudes towards institutions and such. Then to see where this is coming from, we can ask them on the origins of these values, if they actually are discussing public affairs at home, within their circle of friends and so on. And then getting to the core, what we need to know, there could be the battery of statements or at least some cluster of questions based on what actually types of things they could be doing towards in the civic society, towards being publicly active. And actually the most important bit, what type of involvement in the public life would they prefer and what are the main barriers in it. And I will now pass the word to Julia, who will take you through the other phases of the research.
Thank you, Tom. So we were trying to follow up on the idea of the minimizing the costs, and one of the follow-up of the phase one would be the desk research. Since we're living in the digital era, what this online conference is actually supporting, we were thinking about how can we use the tools that we already have in the hands for free, and it turned out to be Google Analytics and social media, which is widely used by the millennials. So for this one, we can actually concentrate on the people who are already engaging with our content, who are already visiting our pages, clicking on the platforms. We can see who are the speakers that are actually interesting to our audience, and if there are any posts that are more engaging than the other one. I think it's also very important to give a spot to the content itself, the language it is presented, if it's comprehensible for the people who are reading it, and if they can understand the language of it as well. So we can monitor the activity.
You know, you only have 2 minutes and you are on phase one. Yeah, so.
Perfect, thank you so much. We're gonna speed this up. So we're using analytical tools for that one. And moving from the phase one to the phase two, we were thinking about the holistic approach of combining all the data that we have in use. And we have already covered the people who are familiar with the pages, who are talking to us, with whom we can interact. But we still have the people who see and think, but who lack the action. So moving forward on the phase two, we are using the qualitative research. This will be the focus group. We're going to concentrate on these people and try to dive deeper on why they are not speaking up, what is the problem, and for this we're going to have the mediators, and either we're going to have the dual moderator focus group, or depending on the current situation, it can also be the online focus group. So this will help us to learn their inner motivation or obstacles. So we have phase one and phase two. We're going to be combining them both. We were trying to look at the different approach from the different sides, and I think this will help us to define and to shape the thoughts and the problems that we have right now. And thank you so much. I think we have fitted in the time given.
Yes, perfect.
Yes, perfect. And it was
seconds.
Oh, so, awesome.
If you can stop sharing your screen so we can see you. and let the jury ask questions.
I have one question from forum. Hi guys. The question is, maybe we missed something, but how do you know your 4 target groups really exist?
I'm sorry, you were dropping. Can you please repeat the question? I couldn't hear it fully.
The question was from the forum. How do you know your 4 target groups really exist? This thing do.
We divided it out ourselves because we are also the part of the target groups because we are all coming from the millennial stage. And we try to think of what are the stages of each person, how exactly you become politically active. So based on this, we divided people into 4 different groups.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any other questions from jury?
Any estimation of costs?
We try to
Okay, Dasha, go on.
Well, we try to keep it on the bare minimum. Basically, the Google Analytics, it's all for free. Plus, if we are cooperating with different NGOs, then again, we are aiming to not spend any money at all on it. The online research will also be done for free because we are using the tools which we don't have to pay for, and we will be using influencers or other people who will be willing to do it for free. So the only part which will require some financial investment will be the phase 2, the qualitative research.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the jury or from the forum? Obvious question, what is the sample for online qual and quant, and what's the budget timing? We already touched, but in terms of sample size.
Well, basically for the qual, since the qualitative research will be done in focus group, that can be very few people, for example, 20 or rather less, so we can actually save some money. Well, for the online research, it's typically near 1,000 people, but to have some normal statistical error, we can work, for example, with, I don't know, 800 or something. But well, sky is the limit. Since we are trying to share it as broadly as possible with using all the ungodly distribution channels, then well, the minimum is around the 800. The maximum is not there.
Thank you. Any other questions from the jury? If not, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank